everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Charles Lipson, Professor Emeritus at the University of Chicago. The second Republican presidential debate was on Wednesday night. So, Charles, to kick things off, what moments stood out to you?
I think that there were two overall takeaways. One was that the most compelling moment actually occurred when Tim Scott talked about slavery and the Great Society programs, and we can come back to that. And but my overall take was that when one candidate is way ahead and none of the others has managed to break out of the pack, uh, then the winner is the one who remained ahead. I thought all the candidates generally put their best foot forward, so I didn't think any of them made terrible mistakes, and I didn't think any of them looked bad. I thought they generally looked good, but I think that just like in prize fighting, they say a tie goes to the existing champ, and Donald Trump is the existing champ.
Okay, then you think the winner then of the debate is Donald Trump. Let's talk about that. Who are the winners? Who are the losers?
Okay, so I thought that the format of the debate favors some candidates more than others, and the way it does that was not because the questions were bad. The questions were excellent, and I felt like I'd rather be mining coal without a mask than trying to moderate that debate. Keeping those cats from scratching each other was a hard business. But the basic format was short answers to that didn't really allow you either to go in depth on your own approach or to contest what others said in any serious way. I thought that hurt a very serious guy, Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, because people just don't know him. And he's a serious guy with a great background. And I thought it helped Vivek, who is a slick guy without much depth. And he could just put out what he wanted to say without being, he was challenged a few times. People did gang up on him, but he wasn't really, I mean, it was gonna be all rainbows and unicorns and candy, and he wasn't really pushed hard enough on how you were going to fire all of these federal workers who have civil service protection, how you were going to get that budget through Congress when you haven't uh, done anything like that, and so forth. I thought that Nikki Haley had huge amounts of data at her easy command. She really knew her brief and made a good case for herself. And I thought that Ron DeSantis, and I think DeSantis and Haley are the ones who are ahead in the polls among all of the sort of seven dwarfs, that he had a good case to make. The problem, however, is that he needs to pivot from I did this in Florida into what I can do for the whole country. And he got off on the wrong foot in his overall campaign, not last night, but in his overall campaign, by essentially running a social conservative message. And I thought he had a better message, and he didn't get it out.
I do want to talk about that Vivek Ramaswamy pile-on that you touched on briefly. He invoked Ronald Reagan's 11th Amendment, which essentially is thou shalt not insult another Republican. And everyone kind of looked at him because that was his tactic going after his fellow contenders last debate. And Nikki Haley landed a pretty powerful punch saying, every time I hear you, I feel a little dumber. What do you think about Vivek Ramaswamy's performance? And what do you think about that pile-on? Do you think it's justified?
I've actually said that to people, not about Vivek Ramaswamy, but I've said that at some academic conferences. I've said after listening to somebody's speech, I've said I feel like I lost IQ points just listening to it. And you know that it's a phrase in a movie where I think it's somebody commenting on something that Adam Sandler said in the movie, and he said everybody in the audience is now dumber for having heard that. Uh, Vivek Ramaswamy is trying a strategy where he uh, simply says whatever he thinks or his polling thinks will work this time, as if he hadn't said something different last time. And I think it speaks ill of the public that candidates, like last time it was Herman Cain, 999. He was going to change all of our taxes and do everything. And it was just a slick slogan. And it took a while for him to fade. But meanwhile, his exhaust fumes are choking other people in the field. And the same is true for Ramaswamy. He's either running for Donald Trump's vice president or for governor of Ohio. But meanwhile, he's in my opinion, he's an embarrassment.
I do want to talk about someone and others that were not on the stage last night, and that is obviously the front runner, far and away, former President Donald Trump. And he skipped out on this debate. He ended up having a rally in Michigan where there are auto workers on strike. What do you make about that decision, and how do you think the dynamic changed in the debate knowing he wasn't there?
Well, I thought you were going to talk about Asa Hutchinson.
He's
who
next.
also wasn't on.
Yes,
Yeah, he wasn't
he's next
on.
on my list. Don't you worry.
Yeah. I think that Trump. Look, you can look at it as a strategic point. Trump made the right strategic decision not to appear because he's way ahead. He could only make additional mistakes. He attracts a lot of viewers. He would attract them, and some people would be looking at other candidates and saying, gee, I kind of like Nikki, or I kind of like Vivek, or I kind of like DeSantis, or whoever. So that was the right strategic decision. And I think it will be harder to do that if he gets down to one opponent, right, in the Republican debates. But so far he hasn't done that. Now, you talked about the auto strike. Let's talk about that for a moment. My opinion about the auto strike is that that when President Biden went there, it was like that old joke of the guy who kills his parents and then throws himself on the mercy of the court as an orphan. And almost all the problems that the auto workers are striking about were caused by Joe Biden's policies. Okay, the inflation, the green energy. It takes between a half and 2/3 as many hours for a worker to make an electric car as it does to make an internal combustion car. The auto companies are losing buckets of money on them. The only one that's making any money is Tesla on electric vehicles. And so the auto companies are very uncertain what kind of future they will have. They've made a lot of money in the last couple of years, but they face a very uncertain future. And what the auto workers are asking for is ginormous amounts of money, and they want it, of course, going forward in a future that they don't know. Now, what about Donald Trump? Donald Trump, the most important thing to understand about Trump is that he has completed a transformation of the Republican Party's voter base. It is essentially now the people who voted for Harry Truman, their grandchildren, right? If you look at the people who were Democrats, blue-collar workers in the 1950s, 1940s, those people were all Democrats, right? The only remnant of them that's left as Democrats are the union leaders, not the union workers, but the union leaders. and the workers in Ohio. Look at what's happened in West Virginia, right? It was an all Democratic state. Now it's all Republican. The only Democrat left as statewide office is Joe Manchin, and he faces real problems. And you have a lot of states that used to be solid Republican states, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia. Those are now, at the very least, purple states. So you've had a transformation on both sides. Polo collar is now Democrat. So Donald Trump is capitalizing on it. He's saying, "I'm with you, workers. I'm not with management. I'm with the workers." And that doesn't mean he supports the specific demands, which would break the U.S. auto industry, but he is emphasizing that he is part of a new kind of party. And I would say almost everybody on the stage last night is trying to win that base and has to appeal to them.
And some of those people on that stage last night directly called out Donald Trump, especially because he was absent. One of the first things Governor Ron DeSantis said is Donald Trump is missing in action. Christie had a moment that some could call cringy when he looked directly in the camera. "Donald Trump, I'm delivering a message to you. We're going to call you Donald Duck, not Donald Trump." Do you think that's a smart strategy to go after the top contender who is so far ahead in the polls? Or do you think that they should have spent more time attacking Joe Biden and his policies?
Well, I think it differs for different candidates. Christie is a one-trick pony in this race, right? His trick is, "I'm going after Donald Trump," and I think he's running for attorney general or something like that if he decides not to run for Menendez's seat in New Jersey. He's unpopular, I should say, in New Jersey. He won these big elections, but he's not popular there now, and so it's unclear if he would want to do that. Bob Menendez and I are in negotiations right now about the gold bars. I would like to have some of those gold bars. One of the key things about taking bribes, allegedly, is don't put it in your refrigerator, as the congressman from Louisiana did. Don't put it in gold bars. Don't get a new Mercedes. Anyway, so that's what he did. I think the other candidates had to make a little bit of an argument about Trump, but frankly, they have to get past each other. So it's a little bit like in bowling, the 7-10 split. You sort of can't get them both. You have to decide, am I going after the 7-pin or the 10-pin? Because it's almost impossible to get them both. So you try to say, I'm different from Trump. But frankly, the question is how? They all are invoking Trump's policies. They're going to build the wall. They're going to do all of these things. But the main thing is they have to say, pick me, not Nikki or Vivek or Doug Burgum. And that's their first and most important task.
In every national poll, when it comes to these GOP presidential contenders, Donald Trump just has a far and away lead. Based on what you saw last night, then, do you think anyone is able to break through the pack and say, hey, I am a viable option that's different from Donald Trump and I can win?
It's such an interesting question, Brittany. I'll tell you something that strikes me after these debates. An election like our recent elections that ended up as 50-50, basically. And then you go back and you poll the next day after a winner has been picked. And you ask, well, who did you vote for? It turns out it's 60-40. People think they voted for the winner or want to say they voted for the winner. And it takes a little bit of time, basically, for the media and for others. That includes you and me. We're part of the media, at least in this context, to sort it out. People listen to it. They watch clips, and they say, well, everybody is telling me that Doug Burgum did a great job, but he doesn't have a chance. And Nikki Haley did a great job, and she does have a chance. And so maybe I'll support her. So it's a little hard to tell who's going to break out of the pack, but strictly based on and who will drop back in the pack. That's a somewhat different question. And I just think that based on last night's performance, it's really hard at this stage to tell. In a week, we'll all agree, oh, yeah, Nikki did a great job. Ron DeSantis, nobody put a finger on him, and so did a bad job, and so forth. But I think until you set higher standards that put three people on the stage and really let them go, you just won't know.
And we'll see higher standards for the debate, the third debate, which is November 8th in Miami. But I do want to talk about even more people who weren't on that stage last night, aside from Donald Trump, one of them being the former Arkansas governor, Asa Hutchinson. He made the first debate, didn't make the second debate stage, neither did Larry Elder or Will Hurd, neither of which, or any of those people, to my knowledge, as I sit here right now, have said they are going to drop out of this race. Do you think not making this debate stage is a fatal blow to their campaigns?
Yes. I just don't think it wouldn't be fatal if they were actually rising right now. They didn't make a poll, but people were beginning to say, oh, I really like Will Hurd and so forth. They're not. None of these people have any momentum behind them. That's not to say that they're not substantive people. And they put their name forward, and they didn't sort of fail in the way that Kamala Harris did when she ran the last time. Nobody expected Larry Elder, a successful talk show host, but he didn't win the governorship of California. He lost by a huge margin. Granted, it's a blue state, but nobody expected him to do very well, and he hasn't. But Kamala Harris in the 2000 sweepstakes for the Democrats was a sitting senator from California, a rising star, African American in a party that is built around identity politics. And her, by the time she dropped out, which was before the Iowa caucuses, she was polling at zero. If it wasn't for her friends and family saying they would vote for her, she wouldn't have had any votes at all. So that was a surprising. But the three you list, Asa Hutchinson, Will Hurd, and any of the other, Larry Elder, any of the other candidates are essentially running for cabinet positions or perhaps a local position in Arkansas or something else.
Let's look ahead to the future. We know the third debate is November 8th. That will be in Miami. That sounds good for Governor Ron DeSantis, who is the governor of Florida, obviously. But we know someone already said they won't be there. A senior Trump campaign advisor said last night, reportedly, Trump already will not be in attendance. And they released a statement calling last night's debate boring and imploring the RNC to cancel the debate since Trump is polling so far ahead. What do you think of all of that noise?
That's what it is, noise. Trump won't be there, and why should he be? It's a terrible thing to call it boring, really, because what boring refers to is television shows or movies. We're not picking a movie star. We're not voting for the best sitcom. We're voting for the President of the United States. And if it's boring to discuss tax policy or what we should do in Ukraine or the federal budget, by the way, I wish there had been questions about how you're going to contain entitlements and a big budget deficit. Does that mean you're going to cut the military? What does it mean? So I think that the fact that they tried to make it a substantive debate was a good thing. The fact that it's in Miami doesn't really help Ron DeSantis for a good reason. The audience was so well behaved. The only time you really heard the audience was kind of a gasp when Chris Christie came up with one of those nicknames that we normally associate with things that Donald Trump does when he called him Donald Duck. I thought it was actually a kind of a clever nickname, but the fact is, Christie is not running to win. He's running to sink Donald Trump. And unless you get this group down to a very few people, 3 or 4, who have time to really debate each other, as well as answer questions in more depth, boring that may be. We're not. By the way, in that regard, I really liked. I think it was Ron DeSantis who said, "We're not voting somebody off the island." Was it him who said that?
He led the charge there. Yeah, he led the charge once Dana
Right.
Perino asked the survivor style question. He was like, "No, I'm not doing that. That's disrespectful." And everyone then piled on and agreed.
Yes, I agree. It was he answered it in the right way. It was disrespectful to the other candidates. It was a silly question, and that had been asked at the end of the last debate, and it embarrassed the people who asked it, not the candidates on stage. And in addition to just saying it would be disrespectful to the others, it reframes the debate in the wrong way. It says this is a television program that we're trying to build audience for. That's understandable if you work for a television station, right? But it's not the goal that we as American citizens should have in looking at these debates. So I'm glad Ron DeSantis did this. Let me say one more word about Ron DeSantis. I have argued that he really maybe permanently hurt himself in the race by framing his candidacy the wrong way. He framed it as, I'm very conservative on social issues, and I'm sure he is. It's not a false statement in any way. And he now has a little bit of an opening because Trump has kind of trimmed a bit on abortion issues. But that was not his strong suit. His strong suit was to say, I agree with the Republican electorate on all these main issues. But what differentiates me from the front runner, Donald Trump, is that I've actually successfully implemented them in Florida. I haven't just said I'm going to implement them. I've done it. And when I've done it, people have come over to our side. And I've turned a purple state into a red state. Those were his two big arguments. And the fact is, he missed them. He has other issues. He's not he doesn't have that wonderful happy warrior quality that Tim Scott has. But the main thing was that he picked the wrong message. And the message, I'm saying, was not only his strong suit, but allowed him to differentiate himself from Trump without having to begin by attacking Trump. And that's a problem for them, not only because to go back to your question, they have to get past each other, but they also have to capture Trump's voters. And you're not going to capture them if you're a candidate who's seen, like Chris Christie is, as attacking Trump all the time, because some of Trump's voters are going to say, you're attacking me too.
You bring up a really interesting point of we should not be calling debates boring because we're talking politics. This affects all of our lives. And for the average American who isn't in the weeds of this every day, this is a chance to get a taste of, oh, could I vote for any of these people to be my leader or to be the United States' leader? So my final question to you would be, what do you think we learned last night?
I think we learned that the Republicans actually have a serious field of people with policy experience, and I think that some of them don't have any chance at all of getting past Donald Trump. That's not a problem with the way that the Republican debates were held. I felt that Ronna
McDaniel.
McDaniel, that's it. Mac. Thank you. Thank you, Ronna McDaniel, uh, who is the head of the Republican bureaucratic organization, the one that runs the party, that their rules for the debate were reasonable. They didn't want to be in a position of taking candidates who were still in the race and ruling them out prematurely. But now we've been at it for a while. We have a chance of seeing who can raise money, who can win polls, and so forth. Now it's time to get down to the few candidates who really have a shot at taking on Donald Trump, because that's the next challenge for all of them. And Trump is right strategically to avoid getting into this fray. By the way, I think Trump has benefited enormously from being relatively low profile. He's not, you don't see him on Twitter every day, right? Because X, as it's now called, uh, because he's got his own social media platform. But he's not busy sort of shooting off his top of the head thoughts on everything. That helps him. He's great at these rallies. The age issue may bother some voters, but as I've written about Biden, the issue with Biden is not age, but the effects of age, the cognitive and physical effects of age, which are really visible on the president. He wanders off when he talks. He wanders off when he is literally on stage, and he can't answer the simplest questions without reading from note cards. So that's a real problem for him. Nobody thinks Trump has his own problems, but those aren't them. He's only a few years younger than Biden, but he is very lively, and I mean, it's amazing given all the court cases that he's facing and all the attacks that have been brought against him. It's like that old song, I Will Survive. I mean, he's singing I Will Survive, and he's certainly got a lot of supporters who are saying, you're surviving for me. He's making a kind of, if you don't mind the analogy, he's making a kind of religious claim. They're coming after me. They're crucifying me, but they're really coming after you. And that's a great claim for him to be making, because, after all, he really is a narcissist. But in the end, he has to appeal to ordinary voters, and he still has that appeal. I would just say, finally, that among the top Republican candidates, among the two or three who could really make the thing, he is probably the weakest in the general election, right? Nikki Haley, I think, could win going away. Ron DeSantis, given some of the things that he's done on abortion and some other social issues, might have a tougher time in the wealthy suburbs. That's assuming he's running against Biden. But I think Trump, how Trump behaved after he lost the last election, and still won't really acknowledge he did so, and though not charged with the January 6th riot, was clearly part of the provocation for it. I think he will have at least as tough a time as he did last time, and we'll have a close race. And he's been associated with 3 losses: the midterm loss in 2000, and in 2018, the loss in 2020, and then the midterm loss in 22. So I think a lot of Republican office holders and candidates are very concerned about him being a drag on the top of the ticket, because his vote total was something like 60,000 votes under the best Republican vote getter in, say, Arizona. So that's going to be a big problem for Republicans, and I don't think Nikki Haley would be that drag, but she's not at the top of the ticket.
Charles, I could go on with you all day. We do have to end it there, though, but thank you again so much for joining me, sharing your insights about the debate. You're welcome back anytime.
I love talking with you, Brittany. It's a real conversation, and I hope it doesn't fall under that category, boring.
I don't think it will be. Thanks again, Charles.